Governor Eric Holcomb overseas this past week in the Persian Gulf country of Qatar. He met with government and business leaders and visited with U.S. troops stationed there. The governor also recently made a trip to Israel. All this as the governor continues his legal fight, getting the green light last week to move ahead with his lawsuit against the General Assembly over their bill allowing the legislature to call itself into session instead of the governor. Let's talk about it all with our panel right now. Abdul Hakim Shabazz from IndyPolitics.org, Indy political science professor, Dr. Laura Wilson with us on Zoom as well. And here in studio today, great to have you both with us, former state party chair Robin Winston and former GOP lawmaker Mike Murphy. Abdul, you're an attorney. I'm going to start with you on this ruling allowing the governor's lawsuit to proceed. What does this mean? And can the governor also prevail on the merits of the lawsuit itself?
Well, in a nutshell, Dan, we've got two things going on here. One is a procedural move. The other one is a substantive move. Now, the substance of the move, that won't be decided until September when Judge Dietrich will hear arguments on the substance of the legislation. This was basically a procedural one. Todd Rickie had filed a motion to dismiss, basically saying that the governor couldn't hire his own lawyer and lawmakers couldn't be sued while he was in session. Now, to keep it at a 30,000-foot level, the judge said no, in a nutshell. And I think this was a major victory for the governor to win on these procedural grounds. So now we move to the next step, which is the substantive grounds.
And Laura, this continues to be quite a legal battle between some pretty key figures in our state government.
It is. And you really see this playing out in terms of a discussion of the Constitution, but to Abdul's point, questions about power, who has the right to make these decisions. And one thing I would just emphasize is we've seen a lot of questions across the country in terms of gubernatorial power. We saw this come up in Texas and California and New York, and of course, playing out here in the Hoosier state, but also keeping in mind that our state legislature is a part-time legislature. They're considered to be moderately professionalized, so they're not in session all the time. Where's the governor is, and of course the attorney general's office is as well. You see this balance of power, and I think we're asking really great questions that in a time pre-pandemic, in a time where we don't really consider the powers of the executive office, we may not be really asking and addressing.
Mike, you served in the legislature. You were once moderately professionalized, as Laura put it there.
That was a compliment.
Right, right. What's the next step for legislators if the governor does prevail here in court?
Well, there is none, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but if the governor wins in the September hearing or beyond, if there's any more appeals beyond that, which I assume there will be the Supreme Court, the legislature can only sit and wait. Remember, the legislature does not count when they're not in Indianapolis. They're very powerful between November 3rd or 4th or 5th and the end of March or April.
And this year they're still technically in session right now in theory because they're coming back for redistricting. Yeah.
But outside, that's why the governor's office and all the people in the State House love to see when the legislature leaves town, because they think now we can get our work done.
Yeah. This week, the Indiana Citizen reporting, by the way, that state legislative leaders are coming together to get that redistricting process ready soon. Robin, in the meantime here, the Attorney General appealing this particular ruling. He's also filed a lawsuit this past week against Google, joining former President Trump this week, who also announced he'd be suing Google, Facebook, and Twitter.
Well, he's joining the Trump bandwagon to go after social media, but 36 other Attorney General, or 35 others also went in on this lawsuit. That has big ramifications. Dan, going back to the earlier discussion about Eric Holcomb, the guy's only got reelected in November. We're already in July, and the Republicans, no Democrats, are challenging his ability to be the governor. They're the ones that have filed suit. His Republican Attorney General looks like infighting within the Republican camp. That's not good for their party.
Yeah, the Republican governor and Attorney General really at loggerheads on this issue. Abdul, we should note when it comes to the AG's lawsuit against Google dealing with whether some of their business practices are monopolistic, former President Trump is suing the tech companies here, claiming that his First Amendment rights have been violated since he's been bounced from those platforms. Do you think either of those suits will hold up in court?
I think the antitrust suit has a much better way to go than Donald Trump's, in my opinion, rather frivolous and silly lawsuit claiming his First Amendment rights are violated. I remind people the First Amendment protects you from the government. It doesn't protect you from private folks. And none of us have been kicked off of Twitter or Facebook because we all follow the terms of service agreement. And had Donald Trump done that, he'd have been fined. So I think his lawsuit is silly and just a way to raise money and stay relevant. So I don't think that'll win. Now, the other lawsuit between Google and the antitrust thing, that I think has some more teeth attached to it.
And we'll see how that one plays out in court. Laura, Abdul mentioned this. Certainly, it could seem to some For the former president, this is also about keeping this issue in the news as well.
I absolutely believe it is. When we join these platforms, oftentimes we scroll through really quickly the terms of service because we don't care. We assume we know. And there's the question, of course, did the former president violate those? The platforms say they did, and thus they have the right to kick him off. But this is keeping his name out there. And of course, there are some that say that this is unfair. Perhaps the terms of service are unfair. To reiterate Abdul's point, and I think this is critical, absolutely everyone should remember it, but the First Amendment protects you from the government. And social media is not the government. So it applies in a different role here. It's not applicable. But no doubt, one of the reasons the former president's talking about it, he wants his name out there. And it's, if he cannot use Twitter, another way that he is able to get people to talk about him.
A lot of this still stemming from the aftermath of the 2020 election. A lot of people still talking about that election. Some protesters were downtown this weekend, in fact, rallying to show support for a proposal to expand voting access for Americans. Activists marching from Senator Todd Young's office to Senator Mike Braun's office in support of a bill known as the For the People Act. It would make some sweeping nationwide changes to voting, including expanding mail-in voting and making Election Day a federal holiday. Supporters say it will help ensure all Americans have a voice, but opponents say elections should be left to the states, not to the federal government. Vice President Harris speaking about this legislation last week. President Biden will be in Philadelphia this coming week to talk about it as well. And Robin, this is a number of Republican states try to enact legislation this year dealing with elections that some feel could restrict voting access in some states.
And Texas is leading the charge on that. Every time we get close in the state, amazingly, restrictions come on. Georgia was the first one. We won 2 U.S. Senate seats in Georgia.
And Georgia lost the All-Star game, by the way,
they lost,
which is this coming Tuesday.
Right,
yeah.
they did, and they're trying to make an issue even of that. But, you know, voting rights, it's interesting. We can go online and book a hotel room tonight, give our credit card, do all those things online, but we're afraid for people to be able to go online, fill out an absentee ballot, be able to get it, expand voting rights. As far as state rights go, we went through this in 1965. States were making sure that people that looked like me could not vote, and the federal government stepped in to make sure. So people that argue that it's the state's right to determine who votes, maybe ought to look at the history.
Mike, ultimately, do you think we might see similar legislation here in Indiana at the State House being put forth by Republicans?
First of all, legislation spreads across the country. There's not very many new ideas under the sun. People go to these legislative conferences like ALEC and NCSL and NCS, and they come back with these ideas, and all of a sudden there's 50 legislatures considering the same idea. I will disagree with Robin on one point, though. I do think, I'm a big 10th Amendment guy, and I do believe that states, it is their job to administer and monitor elections and to legislate. Now, unless it violates civil rights, and then the civil rights trump. But that's a legal determination ultimately by the Supreme Court. But overall, day to day, I think the states should be running the elections.
And obviously, it's the kind of thing that could wind up in the courts, a lot of these bills being put forth. All right, meantime, also talking about the fight against COVID-19. We heard from state health officials on Friday about this Delta variant. We've seen other cities, other countries reinstate restrictions. Impossible to predict what might happen. Abdul, you think that seems unlikely to happen here? You were at that press briefing with state health officials on Friday.
Yes, I was there, and like I said, as much as they are concerned about the Delta variant and the other variants, it doesn't look like, at least for now, that they're going to go back and put in restrictions because so many people, unlike last year, this time have been vaccinated. What I thought was really interesting was Dr. Box and also Dr. Weaver basically saying that for folks who haven't been vaccinated, they're concerned about their safety, that the state may have to switch to more of a one-on-one approach, like, talk to friends, talk to neighbors, talk to healthcare providers. Now, those folks convince people to get vaccinated because vaccination is the best way to protect yourself, from COVID-19 and all the variances.
And Indiana still lagging behind a number of other states in some of those metrics. All right, our thanks to the panel. They're going to be back for this week's winners and losers coming up in just a few minutes. And coming up next this Sunday in Focus, we're talking about new civics requirements for Indiana students. We'll talk with the state lawmaker who helped make it happen up next.